So yesterday we drew trees, okay? So we looked at the basic form of a tree, and we also, for review, guys, remember that the branches, as we go from the trunk of the tree up to the smaller branches, they're going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. You're never going to get a branch that gets bigger once it's already veered off from a smaller area. So for instance, over here, we have a big, thick trunk. The trunk goes out, we have a fairly thick branch, and then this branch is going to veer off into little V shapes, and those are going to get smaller and smaller and veer off into more and more V shapes. And then we spoke about clumping, and you guys looked at the reference images on your pages, and we saw that the canopies to the tops of the trees, they tend to clump into little sections. Clumps of branches have the leaves attached to them, so that's what we're going to focus on as well. And then we talked about space, and we talked about how branches that appear smaller and darker are going to be the branches that are spatially further back. We cannot see them as much, they have less detail. And that's our element of space, right? So yesterday you guys did very, very well on drawing your roots. Remember, we start the structure with the roots. You always want a base to your tree. So don't forget that now when you do your final drawing. We want it to look very organic. We don't want any right angles. Nothing should be very edgy. It should all be very round and move like it's natural. Draw. You're going to go horizontal today. So horizontal meaning long ways in your sketchbook, looking like my page over here. And you're going to write the heading for me, how to draw leaves. And then you're going to mark page 6 or whatever page you're on, and make sure that you're adding that to your contents page. Remember that is part of your sketchbook grade is organization. So make sure that you are staying organized. Okay, so yesterday we focused on the whole tree. Today we focus on a branch and a couple of leaves. So just so that you're aware, and it'll be helpful for you guys to know, I'm using this reference image on your handout today. So at your table you have 2 or 3 of these handouts, and I'm using this one right here today. And follow along with me now. We're going to start with the thicker end of the branch. Then you're going to have a better result. You're drawing soft, veer off slowly. Don't let your branches become thin very quickly. They must veer off slowly. The branch in the back here is slightly darker because it is in shadow. And remember, that is part of value. We must understand whether light is hitting the object that we are drawing. Don't sigh, you got it, you got it. I'm moving forward. If you're still working, that's all right. You work at your own pace. And then yesterday, this is the part where everyone got a little stressed. What we're going to do now, very softly, is we're going to group our leaves. So again, I'm looking at that reference image over here, and I'm saying, how are these leaves grouped together? So up top here, we have one little canopy of leaves. And remember, overlapping is fine. Overlapping is visually interesting. And so I'm going to start with just a basic shape to show me what my leaves look like. And they have a big canopy here going towards the sunlight. And softly, 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 I'm just drawing this one in. Same over here, we have a grouping of leaves, and they're overlapping into the top leaves here. Remember, overlapping is spatially interesting. So we want to make sure that we are overlapping. We want to think about how the viewer is looking at our work and if that is visually interesting to the viewer. Remember, organic lines, no sharp edges, very, very scrubbly, soft, round. And then again, we have another bit of foliage here at the trunk of the tree, or the trunk of the branch rather, pushing its way down. And I'm just trying to get that basic shape right now. This is all planning. Make sure your head is nice and high up, and that your work is on the table. Remember, for planning, it's important to have your head high up so that you can see exactly what's in front of you. If you put your head low down, then you're going to focus in on details. And right now, we're not working on details, we're working on planning. Simple forms, guys. Keep it simple. Now, pay attention here. Who can tell me and describe, what do these leaves, what kind of, how would you describe them?
Birds.
Birds. That's better. What else? They're kind of spiky, right? Like stars. Can you notice that? Have a good look. So what we're looking for is spiky kind of star shapes. Your stars don't have to be perfect. They can look more like birds. I like that interpretation, birds. And notice, guys, some of the foliage here has a very dark shadow to it. And that's because we're getting the leaves are on top of each other, and it's causing a cast shadow, right? So what I want to do now kind of randomly is we want to put in little spiky bird shapes or star shapes. And we're going to put them in dark, here, there, and everywhere. Kind of layer them out and let them fall off the edges now and then, to let your trees become a little bit more spiky, because this is kind of a spiky tree. And so we're starting to put our layering in. And so I'm looking at the tree and I'm looking back and forth at my reference image, and make sure you're looking at that reference image at your table, and put in these spiky forms for me wherever you see those darker layers. What does organic mean?
Organic means natural.
Natural, very good.
Like you ever go to Whole Foods in the village?
Yeah, exactly, Whole Foods. Or what's the other one? Not Whole Foods. What's the other one called? Not Kroger. I like Aldi. Look at that value scale. What value would you say our spiky leaves are right now? Who can put up their hand and tell me? This is number 1, and that's number 6. 2, I would agree. They're not dark, but they're quite dark. These are our shadows, okay? So we're looking for dark values. Now let's do the same. Let's go for a number 2 or a number 1, and let's put the shadow. It looks like the light is from a top, and so we're getting a slight shadow on the bottom of our branch. So go ahead and put that shadow onto your lower, not the whole branch, just the lower end of your branch. And of course this one is very dark because it's behind. Further back spatially is going to become darker.
We shadow it in.
Yeah.
Not the whole thing, just the bottom section, because the light is from above. And you can also remember that the form is round, so you can give it a slight round feeling by moving your pencil in a round motion. What we want to look at now is the shapes. So what I'm going to do now is a little bit of line work. Remember, line is just the outline. And I'm going to start putting little star shapes and even little zigzaggy lines all over my bushes to give the illusion of leaves. So go in and yesterday we did very round leaves. Today we're doing very edgy, spiky leaves, like birds or like stars. So all around, and the most important thing here, guys, is to let them spike off the edges so that we lose that round planning shape that we started with. So we want them to spike out. Sprouts. That's what the one I was thinking of, Sprouts. You guys ever been to Sprouts? Very expensive.
Yeah.
I bought a piece of meat from Sprouts once. I wanted to make a stew, and the piece of meat was $60. Oh, $60. Yeah.
Why are you buying meat for $60?
Because it's tasty.
Miss Dillon, you got ripped off. You can find something. How big was it? You can find something cheaper. How big was it?
It was a big piece of meat like this. And I put it in the oven for 4 hours. And then it's tender. You rip it apart with a fork.
4 hours.
4 hours. A roast, what you call a roast. Who can tell me so far, who can put up their hand and tell me which elements of art do we have so far? Value, tell me a little bit about value. What is value? Exactly, value. So if we look at value scale, we're looking for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The more values, the more realistic. What else do we? Shape, okay, what kind of shape? Stars and the trunk to the tree. Line, that is our most basic element of art. It's the most important one to get right. And we did a lot of line work in the beginning. That's our planning. Space, tell me a little bit of how you're seeing space. Yep, okay, so we have negative space behind our foliage and behind our trunk. The space that is not used is called negative space. And we've got positive space in the leaves and the trunk, and then some negative space in between the leaves as well. If you look at the value scale now, which values would you say we've included so far? 4, so I would say we need to work on number 4 a little bit more. So look up very quickly, guys. Make sure you're looking at me. This is the part that's going to progress our leaves one step further. So now we have a lot of number 6, a lot of white space. We have a lot of number 1 and number 2. So what I'm looking for now is a little bit more of number 3 and number 4, and a little bit of number 5. So those middle values, those are what in middle school we forget about. So be careful now not to overdo it, because everything starts to look muddy if you overdo it. But very gently, I just want you to start to bring in some of those softer values in between your leaves. A little sketchy. You can stay with that star shape if you want, but I want you to start to bring in those mid values. The mid values are the most difficult ones to remember. And so in between, here and there, bring me in a number 3 and a number 4 and a little bit of number 5. And bring back that number 6, that really, really dark value where your darkest shadows are falling. This is going to make that contrast happen. Mani, what does contrast mean?
Black and white.
Black and white? Who can expand for me? Guys, when I have something very dark, look at the tree trunk over here, and I have something very light, that relationship is causing a contrast. Because it's very white behind and it's very dark in front, the darker pieces are pushing forward, right? We see them more clearly. This is a contrast. Whereas if I start to put in a really dark background here, which I don't want to do, my leaves start to fall away and we have less contrast. So we want to make sure that we are always causing a contrast between a very dark value and a very light value to push our focal point forward. Brody, what would you say the definition of a focal point is? What you want someone to pay more attention to, the focal point. So when you do your final for me, you must also decide on a focal point, okay? What is your tree going to look like? What animal are you going to do? Are you going to do an animal? Are you going to do a human? Is he going to be the focal point? Is the tree going to be the focal point? These are things you need to start deciding, okay? For your final, what you are going to need to include is a tree of your choosing. It could be an oak tree. It could be a weeping willow like from Pocahontas. It could be an African tree like from Lion King. Up to you. And then you must include either an animal or a human. And then you must also include a background to show me you understand space. Remember, as things go back in space, they're going to become faded and less detailed and smaller. So that is how we're going to learn a little bit more about our elements of art. You're also going to show me texture on your trunk and your leaves. And you're going to show me value and form in your animals and your trees.